All right, we're on here. Yeah, great. Got some crazy lights. We're back. We're back. It's book talk. It's a whole new book. We're celebrating this time Mulligan Stew. Um, I read this book originally in April of '95, and I used to just read parts of it, like especially the poems and it used to be around. It used to seem like a lot longer book. It's a little over. This version's only a little over 400 pages. I don't know. The Grove made it seem like a lot longer book, but you know, I first read it in '85, and then I read it again in the '90s, and I, it just seemed like a way different book because I had by that time I had read pretty much everything by Sorrentino up until Under the Shadows, and so it just seemed like a different book. But I mean, and so I decided since I just read Joyce, Ulysses for like almost 3 months, I thought like I go to this book back to the original, and and this book kind of comes out of in the beginning it quotes Flann O'Brien and James Joyce. I can't find where that James Joyce, but I done me best when I was. I think it's from Ulysses, but I couldn't find the page. I think it might be in the Cyclops episode. We'll see. But as you know, let me just kind of go over this the book because so it starts off with 17 letters. One is a reader's review. So let me read. The reading review is really good because it kind of like tells you what's coming in the story here. So let me read a little bit of the read. It's like they do, and so it's a reader's review Mulligan Stew by Horace Rosset. Basically, this novel or fiction tells the story of an avant-garde novelist, one Anthony Lamont. He is writing a novel, an intellectual detective mystery story in the manner of Robe Gray or Le Brulard. Not sure who that is. We'll figure it out later. One that he hopes will finally make his name. We are permitted to read the chapters of Lamont's novel as they are completed, rewritten, revised, agonized over as they reveal to us an exquisite, if rather shakily oniric talent. They reveal also, and more importantly, a star-crossed author, for Lamont's failures prefigured and reflected in his novel. So Lamont, I kind of consider Lamont to be the main character, but in the novel, it's Martin Halperin's the main person. Okay, so Lamont's main figures, two friends and business associates, are given their reality through a series of chapters that analyze their characters ruthlessly. Their names are Martin Halperin and Ned Beaumont. And and then there's they're both in love with Daisy Buchanan. And the word surfiction comes up. That's a word that I kind of haven't heard in a while. Surfiction. So a lot of books were called surfiction, surfictionist. That was like a term. I don't know. I'll look it up, figure out what. But I guess it's another word for metafiction or postmodernism. So we have all the letters, and there's a letter to Barney Rossett by Gill too in there. So he's like, and I'll get to that. And then we have like quotes from Flann O'Brien, and then we get the first chapter. So the first chapter, he's kind of like, it's kind of like just like a parody of like Unreliable Narrator. So we get a couple pages of that. So this isn't even like the introduction. This is even before the Fallen Lucifers chap. So And then he has a couple letters to Professor Roach. Professor Roach apparently lives in the Midwest somewhere, and he's teaching his uh, uh, Anthony Lamont's book, Fretwork. And he mentioned some other books, Baltimore Chop, Three Deuces, Rayon Violet, like, and some of them are out of print. And so, he writes a letter to Sheila Henry and mentions her husband um, in there, and then we get like the Lamont's notebook. He's talking about writing, and then he kind of goes back to, oh yeah, how did I deal with it in Baltimore Chop? And then we get a little bit of part of it. Then another letter to Professor Roach. He sends us some copies, and then we get, and finally we get to Fallen Lucifers, and it's almost a rewrite of what we read before. It's not so frantic, but they're having it's like a conversation. They're like talking about branch or talking about rocks. They're like obsessing over different words, and they're having a conversation, and then we kind of and then we have the letter. So and then we're up to page 14. So that's pretty much the first the first section. We have the letters. We have a few quotes from authors. We have the first like draft of the first chapter. We have a couple letters of Professor Roach, and then real letters. And then then we have Fallen Lucifers, the first chapter of this book. What's it called? Guinea Red, or I think the name of the book is called Guinea Red. So let's go to some of the facts about this book. Okay, so Mulligan Stew is a postmodern novel by Gilbert Sorrentino. It was first published in 1979 by Grove Press, simultaneously in hardcover and softcover. Like, they don't really do that anymore. I wonder why they did that. But postmodernism, my own version of postmodern, I don't use the word postmodernism anymore, especially authors from the 70s. I call them retro modernists, because they're kind of discovering the books of Joyce and Thomas Mann and others, and kind of redoing it in the 70s, and as opposed to what was going on at the same time. The minimalist, the kind of new journalist stuff of Thomas Wolfe and Norman Mailer. The more standard. They weren't really beatniks, although some of them might have been influenced by that. And so my other thought was, because I've been watching, like, recently in my own life, I've been watching a lot of films from the late 70s, like, and I just watched Sorcerer by William Friedkin, and a lot of the people, I mean, there was a lot of you may know, a lot of film buffs out there, that Friedkin was doing Sorcerer at the same time as Coppola was doing Apocalypse Now, and Cimino was doing Deer Hunter and Heaven's Gate. And there was it was kind of like, I mean, that whole kind of American kind of like the golden age, what they say, in pornography too, and in the American films, where they were kind of influenced by foreign films and French New Wave, and kind of doing these kind of real bitter, realistic movies. And so, I mean, Sorcerer starts out with this like really like elaborate, 4-part, kind of like backstory that doesn't really have to do much with the except for this is just like, okay, where did these guys come from? And then, and then you go to Deer Hunter, which has like the opening scene is like a 1-hour wedding scene and stuff. So, and then, then you get like Coppola, and like a lot of these movies, I mean, all of them are like long 2-hour, 3-hour movies. And some of them would not be made today. I mean, like Sorcerer might be like at the time, the most money ever given to a director to go off to some foreign country to, and wherever he made, Nicaragua or Central America, and he filmed some in Mexico. Like I mean, it was pretty far-fetched and stuff. And so in the novels, we get all these guys like Robert Coover with The Public Burning, Darkerville's Cat by Thoreau, Sorrentino, of course, and others writing very long novels that were not written for commercial appeal. They weren't like hip in the sense like, oh, I'm writing like some kind of cutting edge. I mean, they were kind of guys that were just, a lot of them, at least like people like Coover and Sukenik, and I'm guessing John Barth and others were professors, and they were kind of like and they'd have during the summer they would be cranking out these crazy novels, and let's get back to so Mulligan Stew. Okay, this book is a metafictional and parodistic examination of the creative process of writing a novel and its failing. It's dedicated to Brian O'Nolan. The title is a reference to the hodgepodge nature of the food. More cryptically, it's a punning allusion, Mulligan Stew, to the character Buck Mulligan and James Joyce's Ulysses. Sorrentino began the novel in November 71, finished it in 75. So it took him nearly 4 years. And it was called Synthetic Ink. And it got 30 rejections. Most publishers praised the novel, and then they said, it's great, it's avant-garde, but it would be a loss. And then eventually Grove Press accepted the book. And Barney Rossett had 3 demands. He wanted a different title. He got it. It was Synthetic Ink. Synthetic Ink is more like sounds like his poetry, or and then Rossett wanted the rejection letters to be published as part of the book. And so Sorrentino agreed to that, and he wrote kind of parody versions of his own. And then Rossett wanted the Mask of Fungo deleted. He wanted it out, but he kept it. Well, I'll talk about the Mask of Fungo in a couple weeks. But so several, he finished it. By 75, he had this done, and so he the Mask of Fungo came out by Black Sparrow Press in 74, and also Splendid Hotel was written during this time. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But let me go to there's a bit in the Grove Press book here where he talks about this time, and let's go to it. I'll mention it when I do an interview. I'll talk about it. But he talks about, so Sorrentino, Gontarski says Grove has published only 1-year novels, Mulligan Stew, which by time is rejected by 25, 30 publishers. What were the circumstances of you publishing Mulligan Stew with Grove? The circumstances of the book, this is Sorrentino, of the book's publication were quite simple and straightforward, really. I sent the manuscript to, as you say, 25, more like 27, 28 publishers from the big houses like Random and Knopf, and the smaller houses like Stonehill, Urizen, Seymour Lawrence, K. Laughlin, and New Direction didn't want to read the book because of its length. He knew it was too much for him to handle. The typescript must have exceeded 650 pages. Anyway, I was getting pretty downhearted about this, especially since so many of the rejections quite simply and candidly stated that the book was not commercially feasible. I was further depressed by the fact that I had completed Crystal Vision before Mulligan Stew been accepted, and it too began making the rounds and being rejected, and for the same reasons, and often by the same people. So I had two manuscripts out in the iron world of trade publishing, and I was fairly well launched on the Aberration of Starlight, with visions of that too being sent around with the other manuscripts, all three books swirling in a vast empyrean of greed and stupidity and contingency. It was an enormous effort to keep writing in the face of all this, although had I not written, I probably would have brooded about it all. Anyway, at a certain point, I did not know what the point was. Probably it had to do with getting a letter of rejection from somebody whose editorial renown was based on his acquiring a book later optioned by Otto Preminger. I don't know, something particularly shameful must have occurred for I certainly had not run out of publishers, and at this point I wrote a letter to Barney telling him in brief the history of the manuscript and asking him if he would like to read it. I also made clear to him that I had earlier contacted him because I didn't want him to think that I was leaning on our earlier professional relationship. And in any case, he replied immediately in the affirmative. I sent the manuscript over, and about 2 weeks later, Barney offered me a contract. Had Grove turned the book down, my plan was to put it in a drawer and think of it as a temporary hors de combat. That was that, and my relationship with Grove came from full circle. Okay, so we have that. So most, if you look at Sorrentino, I'll get to, maybe I should, let's see. No, I'll go to, let's see. Let me get to it now. No, oops. Okay, so if you look at his okay, so I guess not. Corrosive Sublimate came out in 71. A Dozen Oranges in 76. White Sail in 77. I think that was also Black Sparrow Press. The Orangey in 78. That was, a lot of these were, if they were on like university presses, and Black Sparrow Press put out a couple of them. Oh yeah, Splendid Hotel. Okay, so Splendid Hotel, as I remember, I think that was done by New Directions. So that's 73. So that came out during his what's going on here? Okay, so I mean, during that time he had the 3 novels going around, and he was starting to write Aberration of Starlight like in 79 or 80. He's poetry. I think he hasn't moved to Stanford yet either. So he's over in New York still, kind of teaching and trying to make a living. So let's go to this bit. Okay, so Mulligan Stew is a postmodern novel by Gilbert Sorrentino. It was first published in 79. Okay, so we read all that. Okay, so Sorrentino began the novel in November. Okay, so we read that too. Okay, so it's just a rehash. Okay, so it came out the book came out May 26, 79. Back I was in high school. They published 200 hardcover, 800 softcover. So that's when I got the book. It was out in 79. So 6 years later, I got the paperback, the gray one, not this one. Where is the book? Oh, here it is. Okay. So yeah, not this. This is the one. This is the Dalkey Archive version from the 90s. I'm guessing, covered by Jack Doyle. Okay, so, and it was published by Marion Boyers. So there's a thing. I noticed in the letters. So there's a few letters, and then there's a reader's report. So the reader's guide is pretty interesting because it kind of explains what you're going to get, and then there's a letter telling Grove that, hey, we're not going to publish this. We're not going to distribute this novel. Find some. This book is is wasting space or something. I totally forgot about that part. So that was like another interesting thing. It's like not only the publishers but the distributors, and the back then, it was a lot. There was American rights and there was English, and so Marion Boyers and Picador published. Okay, so and she rejected it initially, so she kind of sat on it a while. Okay, so there's different ones. So Grove Press, they didn't want to reprint it. They didn't want to do a new version. And Dark Archive did the 96. Okay, so is this 96 or I've seen a few different ones. Let's see. So I don't know. I'm guessing this is like the 96 version. I mean, there's a 2023 one paperback. So I don't know. I'll look it up. I'll look it up in the front. Yeah, Marion Boyer. I didn't know about them. Yeah, Marion Boyers. Grove published it, but they declined. So 85 is kind of around the time when Ann Getty bought Grove. So they probably didn't want to do like some of the Barney stuff. And yeah, there's a French translation called Salmi Gondis. Okay, so this book is a multi-layered novel starting even before the front matter. A letter exchange between editors and Sorrentino's presented their reasons for rejecting the novel. The novel itself consists of three main layers, namely the comments, notes, and letters of the fictitious author, Anthony Lamont, as he develops and writes his novel, initially called Guinea Red and later titled Crocodile Tears. Various chapters of Lamont's novel with Martin Halperin as the protagonist are all stylishly different. And comments of Halperin himself, who is the main actor of Lamont's novel. Other matter is interspersed, such as advertisement, erotic poems from Lamont to review, a mass play, and an academic type manuscript concerning a mathematical proof. As part of the stew, the novel contains intentionally bad writing. In Lamont's novel, Halperin believes that he has killed his friend and business partner, Ned Beaumont. Beaumont had a love affair with Daisy Buchanan, who is married to Tom Buchanan, and also became a love interest of Halperin. Beaumont, however, has fallen under the seductive spell of two other women who went on exploiting them, and Halperin's effort to rescue has been futile. As Lamont develops his novel, he seeks unsuccessfully the support of his ex-wife, Joanne, and his sister, Sheila Lamont, also known as Sheila Henry. No. Is that true? Maybe not. Okay, so we'll just call it Sheila. Joanne is Sheila Lamont, who's married to Dermot Trellis, writer of The Red Swan. Lamont despises the more successful brother-in-law. So it's kind of like a Alexander Thoreau, Paul Thoreau situation there, because he believes he writes with commercial interest in mind. He is furious when the Midwestern Associate Professor Roach prefers his work over Lamont for his chorus. He tries unsuccessfully to seduce a poet who has sent him erotic material. Under the impression there is a conspiracy against him, he schemes on how to publish his novels. Halperin and Beaumont have a life of their own outside of Lamont's novel, and unbeknownst to him, they complain about their work, the shabby dialogue, the degradations, and the incomplete scenery. and meet other characters who also complain about their writers, notably the cliches they're exposed to. As Lamont is developing his novel, he becomes more and more pretentious and delusional. His support systems fail, and the story gets out of hand as he loses direction and control. Halpern feels he even may have died. Eventually, his characters leave him, and Halpern runs off. Beaumont, too, provided he is alive. Okay, the concept that characters have a life of their own is seen in the work of Brian O'Nolan, to whom the book is dedicated. Thus, characters of Mulligan Stew have links to other works. Among them, Anthony Lamont, Sheila Lamont, Dermot Trellis, and Swim Two Birds by Brian Nolan, Daisy and Tom Buchanan in The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald, Martin Halperin, Corey Carrenio, Berth Delamotte in James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, Ned Beaumont in The Glass Key by Dashiell Hammett. Mulligan Stew was widely reviewed on first publication. McPherson, he wrote, William McPherson, he has a book called Gilbert Sorrentino, A Descriptive Bibliography. I think I might be in it too. I think I had letters to let's see, Mulligan Stew was right. McPherson quotes excerpts from 72 reviews. According to the New York Times, Mulligan Stew was Sorrentino's commercially most successful novel and named one of the best books of 79 by the New York Times Book Review. Okay, so there's a review. So yeah, we're getting. Let's see. Yeah, there's some other stuff here. I gotta check this out. And some other reading: Harold Brown, Self-Reference, and Logic in Mulligan Stew. And there's a special issue of Review of Contemporary Fiction from 2011, Gilbert Sorrentino, Mulligan Stew. I'll definitely have to get that too. Excuse me. So let's see how we're doing on time. We've been going pretty long. Okay, so 26 minutes. Okay, so yeah, so the first chapter, when you read this, it's like it's very confusing. It's like especially because you get letters of rejection. You get this first kind of bad chapter, and then you get a couple letters to Professor Roach, and then he's like quoting his other book. And then when you get to Fallen Lucifers, it's basically the same chapter from that we previously seen, and so yeah, let's stop it there. So that's the first chapter, and the next chapter is Best Intentions, and let's see it. And so you should be on page 14 now. Let's see. Okay, so Best Intentions. Okay, it looks like it's okay. Okay, so it goes up to page 48. So that's about 30. Best Intentions about 30 pages. So the first, I mean, it's a pretty wild opening. And you might want to reread some of this stuff because he refers back and forth. So in that bit, and so there you have it. Fallen Lucifers, Gilbert Sorrentino. Mulligan Stew. This is an important work. It's definitely got me interested in fiction, and and when I discovered it like 4 years ago. Okay, everybody, we'll see you next week.